The business revolution starts today. We stopped the burden. We found a better way.
Well, welcome back to The Business Revolution, the podcast where we're rewriting the rules of business for a sustainable future. I'm Alan, your co-host.
And I'm Cherry.
And I'm Mick. We are your guides, or we would like to be your guides on this journey to explore the intersection of business, sustainability, and positive change.
And to do that, every episode we'll bring you inspiring conversation with experts, entrepreneurs, change makers, who are proving that sustainability isn't just good for the planet. It's actually good for business.
So we will uncover innovative solutions, share practical strategies, and discover new trends that will shape the future of sustainable business.
Whether you are a seasoned CEO or a budding entrepreneur or simply curious about how to make a difference in the business world, well, you've come to the right place.
So I hope you've got your cup of tea or your suitable favorite brew. Just settle in and be ready to be inspired. This is The Business Revolution.
Now the business revolution starts with you. The business revolution starts today.
In this episode, we're going to explore the often overlooked but very important, the crucial G in ESG. Governance.
And to help us explore the intricacies of good governance and its impact on sustainable business practices, we are super thrilled to welcome Perrin Carey, the visionary founder and CEO of CoSteer.
Welcome, Perrin. Perrin brings a wealth of experience in helping organizations navigate the complexities of modern governance. CoSteer is at the forefront of providing innovative solutions that empower businesses to build robust and transparent governance frameworks. So, Perrin, can you tell us a bit about CoSteer and specifically how you and CoSteer address the G in ESG?
Goodness, that's a whole podcast just in one question there, Jerry. Very quickly, because I really want to dive into our perspectives on governance. CoSteer was born out of a research project that I did for a master's degree back in 2018. But it had been a long-standing challenge of mine as to how do we integrate governance properly into organizations? That research led to a deep exploration through the years of COVID and then the development of a piece of technology which supports organizations. So CoSteer is an unusual business. It's a tech business, but in the space of governance. Your second bit of that question, we're going to have to dive in separately here. So you see, let's look at the way that we see governance currently. Most of us. We see governance most commonly as a process-driven framework, often surrounded by aspects of compliance, maybe risk management. And in the ESG space, it sits as this tag-on at the end of this acronym. But imagine, if you would, something different. Picture that beautiful spectacle in the sky that you see at dusk, starlings in murmuration. You can see it across woodlands and across seaside towns in the UK, the US, around the world. That, for me, is governance. Governance is beautiful synchronicity. It's interconnectedness. It's a group of human beings centralized around a common purpose with really clear shared values. No hierarchical leadership, decentralized decision-making. And if you can imagine that transition of moving an organization, a group of organizations, a whole concept towards that type of ideology, then you move into a different space. You move into a world where governance is in fact beautiful. And that isn't something you hear often in boardrooms.
No, absolutely not. I love that starling, that murmuration, Perrin. I think, I've worked in that space, and often governance is about hierarchy. It's about delegations of authority, who can make those decisions, and structures and processes. So how are you working with organizations to make that shift to think differently about governance? I think it's almost like, as you said earlier, the G has to come before the E and the S.
Yeah. How do we do it? I'll come on to a minute. I think my ideal is that these three things are completely interconnected. They're interwoven, and we've given it an acronym because that helps us as human beings. What we tend to then do, because we are human beings and therefore we're almost obsessed with linearity. So we go, oh, there's an E, oh, there's an S, oh, there's a G. But really, these three elements are utterly interconnected and interwoven. So how do we address this with boards and leadership and organizations? I think we tackle it first and foremost by just clarifying that governance is not corporate governance. Governance is really about the quality of the decisions that are cascading and rippling across your organization every single day. So there was a Harvard Business Review that was done a while ago, looking at the number of decisions that we make as human beings a day. 33,000. 33,000 decisions. Now, even if you just go into the workplace and you extract 8 hours of your day, suddenly you're at 10,000. Multiply that up across people in your organization, and you are talking about millions and millions of decisions that are made every single day in your organization. For me, governance is everything that informs, that wraps, that begins to inspire the quality of those decisions across your organization. And so once you begin to have a conversation in that vein, then governance becomes a living thing. It's not something that sits on a policy or a piece of paper or an intranet. It becomes a living human system. And that's how we approach governance with organizations, as a living human system.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. I've worked in environments where you've got a reasonable level of alignment, and that alone is a massive improvement. But this is taking it 2 or 3 levels further. What are some of the big challenges that you're seeing in leadership, I guess, to overcoming that and to actually become that one?
Wow. There are lots of challenges. A lot of it is around education and acknowledgement of the fact that governance is in fact this deeper, broader living thing. I think once leaders have gone on that journey of acknowledgement, there's a kind of wave that comes with them. And we see this across organizations and leadership. What we've found is that when leaders have the opportunity to measure and observe the governance in their organizations, then it comes alive. And so the challenge that we addressed really at CoSteer was, can we begin to bring alive in visual form governance, rather than it being this report that's done, every year, and we go through and we comply, or we explain, or we do both of those. We list all the policies and procedures that we do. We pat ourselves on the back because we've written great minutes. And I'm not saying that any of these things are unimportant, but we need to think of the purpose of all of these things, because purpose is at the core of everything, right? The purpose of good minutes, the purpose of a policy, the purpose of having procedures, controls, and frameworks and systems is to improve decision making. And if you can bring that living system of decision making alive in a visual form, then you bring leadership, you bring boards right with you. And that's what we've built and created. And I know this is not about us sort of talking in detail about that, but I think if you can visualize that in some way, then you bring boards and leadership on that journey with you.
It sounds like you, and I feel like I'm paraphrasing some of the things you said, but it sounds like you're taking what is an abstract concept and making it tangible, making it realistic, because people can see something, and then you can hold the mirror back to them so that they can sort of relate to it and know that it is them. Does that sound about right?
I would say that's a brilliant summary of what we do. We endeavor to, so let's go back to that murmuration that we were talking about earlier. So what we have been able to do is visually show where all of the people are in your organization in relation to each other around 27 core themes of what we will call governance, but you could call organizational efficacy, right? So what we've been able to do is create a visual image of that for organizations. So imagine being able to look at a screen or look at a piece of paper and say, this is where our people are in relation to each other on the performance of our organization right now. We know the direction we want to go in, and in a few months' time, we're going to retake that picture and we're going to observe how people have moved over time in relation to each of these aspects that we measure, but also in relation to each other, because this isn't just about is the organization performing, it is also very much about where people are in relation to others. And it'll come up later in some of our conversation about how we do that. But yes, you're right, Alan. It's really about trying to visualize what has become a compliance paper-driven tick box exercise into a living exercise. Yeah.
How does AI come into that room? Is it an enemy or is it a friend?
I would say it could be an enemy or a friend. It depends on the human touch of that. And I think this is true for all of, let's say, generative AI. And I use that term more deliberately. We've utilized AI for the last 6 years. Our AI is very much from the 1960s. It's about high-powered mathematical computation, looking at interconnections and interrelationships and trying to understand a living system. Generative AI is completely different. It uses large language models to obviously support human work if the human touch is positive. So where does it come in? I think it comes in across the piece. If we go back again, and I'll keep coming back to this, governance is about the quality of the decisions that we're making as human beings. If there is anything that can support the quality of decisions that we make, both individually, let's say 10,000 decisions we make, if we can improve the quality of those decisions every day, and if we can improve the quality of the decision making collectively. Now, often when we think about the ESG space, we are talking about decisions at leadership or board levels in terms of the direction of travel of an organization towards environmentally sustainable and reciprocal engagement with nature. Then the quality of those decisions collectively is so critical. We think that we're good at making collective decisions. I would argue that we're not that good at making collective decisions. And there are numbers of reasons for that. One of them is principally being human and some of the innate challenges that we face as being human. Happy to come on to that. But I would say AI plays a critical role and can play an immense role in improving the quality of the decisions we make and then how well we implement those decisions. So yes, multiple factors, multiple ways, traditional AI, machine learning, we utilize all of this. So yes, it can absolutely have an impact.
You're reminding me of another theme in here, because when people talk about AI and from mixed question, it's almost like a risk perspective. But I'm going to move away from AI and just stay with the word risk. Going with the murmuration, you've got the leaders at the front of the flock, and you've got whatever, I don't know the dynamics of the birds in this, but you've got the followers who are definitely going to be changing along the way, and everybody is adapting as the whole flock moves around. In a corporate setting, that could be perceived from a leader perspective that that's a risk that the flock isn't going to follow, that the risk is going to go their own direction, or that the others won't even notice that they're coming, and so there's going to be a mid-air collision. How is risk sort of managed in this space?
Okay. Wow. What a brilliant question. I'm going to try and tie these things all together, right? What you were saying, Alan, about starlings and murmuration, and I'm going to just correct you on one thing. There is no leadership. Leadership is completely decentralized in starlings when they perform murmuration. How, therefore, do they manage to do what they do with almost no collisions? So if you look at some of these spectacles, they're 40, 50, 100,000 birds up in the sky, and there won't be a single collision. So the way that they do this is, and this has been evidenced by research conducted by Giorgio Parisi in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and he videoed starlings in murmuration across the city of Rome in Italy. And he observed that each starling takes reference from its 7 immediate neighbors. Now just translate that to organizations and people. What we know from psychology and what we know from behavioral science is that our behaviors are most significantly influenced by 7 people. So when we think about the behaviors across an organization, we actually don't take our steer necessarily from the executive leadership that stands 3 levels above us. We, in fact, take our steer of how we behave, how we perform, the nature of the decisions that we make, the way we communicate with other people across our organization. We take that steer from the 7 most influential people around us. Now, in a flock of starlings, that's the most immediate neighbor. But us as humans, we're more sophisticated in the way that we observe patterns around us. So it doesn't need to be our most proximal person to us sitting in the office. But it doesn't really reach beyond 7 because it's too much for us to take in. It's too much noise, right, going on. So we essentially tune in to the 7 most influential people around us. So coming back to your question, I'm trying to relate this back to your question, Alan, about risk. The real risk to organizations is, in fact, rigidity and the inability to adapt and move. The most common reason for organizational, let's say, an organization ceasing to exist in some form is actually the inability to adapt. And I'm going to make one other biological reference here. We've been taught that it's the survival of the fittest, but that's actually a misquote, right? It's not the survival of the fittest, it's the survival of those most able to adapt. And we know this now from all of our studies across ecology. And so it's the same in organizations. So the biggest risk to an organization is inability to adapt. The inability to adapt comes from rigidity. Rigidity comes in most organizations due to highly structured hierarchy, highly process-driven, policy-orientated organizations with incredibly rigid decision-making frameworks. And what we're seeing in many organizations now is a gradual move towards decentralizing some of that decision-making. How do you do that and at the same time mitigate risk and open up opportunity? Well, how we do that with organizations is we move organizations towards a really clear purpose and values orientated decision framework. So rather than decisions being dictated to by systems and controls exclusively, we move towards a collaborative approach where decisions can be made both through a system and control. So there are still systems and controls and they are important and they do mitigate risk. But we also encourage leadership to really embed the core values of their organization into their decision making and surround those decisions with the purpose of their organization. So take an example, in a boardroom or even in a meeting, you come across something that you haven't had to experience before. You've got to make a decision. There is no system. There is no process. There is no policy that surrounds this decision. It's like out of the box. And what we encourage teams to do is to observe the purpose, embed that into the decision, look at the values, address those values as you walk through your collective decision-making process. And then what we find is when you come out the other side, you've actually made an incredibly powerful decision that's onboarding the concepts of risk, but most importantly, creates an agile organization that can take opportunity. So hopefully that kind of understands. I'm trying to bring the biomimicry into human organizations because it's tangible, it exists, it's real. We've seen it. It's operating across our clients right now, and it's beautiful to see.
I'm so excited. You have really changed the G in ESG for me and made it into something I want to know a lot more about. Unfortunately, our podcasts are usually not that long, so we'll have to refer our listeners and YouTube viewers to your website, or what would you be your advice to where do we go from here? I'm excited now. I want to know more. Where do I go?
Where do you go? Okay. If you want to see more about our work, yes, there's our website, but actually, and maybe we can put this link in whatever comes out. We've been running a research program for the last 5 years with the Good Governance Academy in South Africa, but they're a global governance not-for-profit trying to shift governance towards this more human living system perspective. And you can find a lot of our videos and research presented back. And here is where I talk a lot more about these ideas in a lot more detail. Other than that, for those that are more kind of interested in hardcore kind of governance, I would point you in the direction of the recently published in 2021-22 organizational governance from the ISO. It's 37,000. It talks about organizational governance from this perspective that it is a system, it's an interconnected system. And as a model, it puts organizational purpose at the heart of governance. And therefore, it's truly leading the way in governance. So those are the two places I would probably point people. Thank you. Yeah, we are working with a couple of governments and governments and government organizations in the Channel Islands. So yeah, it's certainly something of interest that's developing.
One last question, Perrin. If you had advice for, CEOs and business leaders around governance, what would that be if we were able to broadcast this live to every single business leader out there?
I would say of the 5 years of research that we've been doing, we've collected 50,000 data points. We've carried out over 2 million, interrelationships, analysis of interrelationships between different factors of organizational governance. There is one thing that emerges time and time again as being the most influential factor on the quality of both individual and collective decision making, and it's compassion. It's compassion for ourselves and it's compassion for others. And I think if there was one message that I had for leaders across the world, be kind to yourself and be kind to others, because that is the biggest driver of high quality individual and collective decision making. It is leaps and bounds ahead of everything else that we're observing in organizational systems. That would be my advice.
That is a wonderful way to end the session today, this episode of The Business Revolution. It's so thought-provoking and wonderful, and I certainly hope that we'll get many people to hear that, because that's fantastic. Thank you. We hope that everybody has enjoyed diving deep into the world of business and sustainability with us in this very different episode, thinking in very different ways. So thank you very much, Perrin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Perrin. And to our listeners, remember the revolution doesn't end here. So it's up to each and every one of us to take this knowledge and inspiration from today's episode and turn it into action.
Whether that's implementing sustainable practices in your own business or advocating for change in your community, every step counts towards building that better future.
But don't forget to visit our website at businessrevolution.earth for more resources, past episodes, and ways to actually get involved with us.
And also, if you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe, rate, and review The Business Revolution on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback really helps us to reach more listeners and amplify our impact.
So thanks for joining us on this journey of transformation. Together, we can revolutionize the way we all do business and create a world that's sustainable for generations to come.
Stay tuned for insights, inspiration, and actionable steps to help reshape the way we do business for better tomorrow.
So until next time, keep innovating, keep inspiring, and keep pushing for positive change. This is Cherry.
This is Mick.
And Alan, signing off. The Business Revolution, it starts with you.
Now the business revolution starts with you.
One last message before we wrap up this episode. As part of the Demystifying ESG series, we have a message from two CEOs on governance.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. I know you're busy. You're steering organizations through turbulent times, making decisions that carry weight far beyond your boardroom. We've spoken about the E, we've spoken about the S, but today let's talk about the G in ESG, governance, and why it's far more than a checklist or a compliance box.
Let me be clear. Governance is not just about minutes and manuals. It's not about control for control's sake. It's about decision-making. And decision-making is everything. Every risk you navigate, every opportunity you seize, every value you claim to uphold, it all comes down to the quality of the decisions made across your organization.
Most people see governance as a process, a structure, a hierarchy. But that mindset is part of the problem, because rigid governance systems often collapse under pressure. They don't adapt. They don't breathe. The future belongs to organizations that can flex, move, and respond. Not with chaos, but with coherence. And that's why I want you to imagine governance differently. Not as rules from the top, but as alignment across the system.
Think of a murmuration of starlings, thousands of birds, no single leader, moving in perfect synchrony. Each bird responds to its 7 closest neighbors, creating a living, breathing system that is agile, adaptive, and beautiful. That is what governance could be. That is what governance must become. Because the greatest risk to your business is not disruption, not competition. It's rigidity. It's the inability to change.
And let's be honest, most companies are still trapped in outdated governance models built for a different century. Models that silo responsibility, that kill innovation, that treat compliance as the end goal instead of a baseline.
We need to shift from hierarchy to purpose, from control to compassion, from tick boxes to trust. Governance done right builds culture. It creates psychological safety. It empowers your people to make better decisions at every level.
And yes, governance is where your values become real, not in your brochures, but in the lived experience of your employees, your partners, your stakeholders. And here's what we've learned from the data. The single biggest driver of high-quality decisions, the kind that build resilient, ethical, thriving companies, is compassion. Not process, not policy.
Compassion. For others, for yourself. Because humans don't take cues from distant leaders or codes of conduct. We take them from each other, from the people we trust, the people closest to us, just like those birds in flight.
So here is my challenge to you. Stop thinking of governance as a burden. Start seeing it as the opportunity it truly is. To rewire your organization around purpose, around people, and around principles that scale. Make it visible, make it living, make it your competitive edge. Because when governance is alive, your company becomes alive. And when governance is beautiful, your business becomes part of something much bigger than itself.
So decide, will your legacy be brittle and outdated, or adaptive and aligned with the future? Because the world is watching, employees are watching, investors are watching, and the next generation is asking, are you building institutions worth inheriting?
Implementing ESG, truly embedding it into the DNA of your company, can feel daunting. It takes time. It takes courage. It means rewiring old systems and letting go of comfortable habits. But here's the truth. The return is real. Strong governance doesn't just build trust. It builds better strategy, smarter decisions, and long-term resilience. It protects your company's future while contributing to the planet's future.
So yes, it takes effort, but it's worth it. For your people, for your business, for our shared home.
And without any doubt, this is why you and we will be on the right side of history.
It may sound strange to speak of revolution, but that is what we need at this time. We need a revolution, revolutionary thinking, revolutionary action.
The business revolution starts today. We stopped the burden, we found a better way. It's both cheaper and cleaner and healthy too. Now the business revolution starts with